What's up, guys? Welcome to the Software Engineering channel. It's good to have you back. In today's video, we're going to be talking about JavaScript Dom. We're going to be talking about how it works. We're going to be looking at different APIs, different methods that has been exposed to us to manipulate a web page, a web document using JavaScript. The JavaScript DOM is a very important concept in JavaScript, and we are going to be looking at how the whole thing works today. Let's dive right in, guys. Now, the first thing is for us to actually understand what exactly the DOM is, right? So the DOM is a data representation of objects that depicts the structure and the content of a document on a web page. Now, when we talk about a document is simply your page. All right, so in a web project, you probably have cart page, you have checkout page, you have index page, which is the home page. Those represent your documents. On the web, we call them documents. So a DOM is basically the data representation of objects, how objects are structured and how the contents are actually structured on that page on your web. That's the way the web sees it. So technically, we can actually say the DOM is a programming interface for web documents. Technically, is more like a contract between your web page and your web browser itself. That's the way the web browser, the engine in the web browser is able to understand what exactly your web page is saying, what exactly your index.html is saying, is able to understand it because there is an interface, there is a contract between them that enables that understanding and is able to also translate your web page into a view. That's what the DOM does. And let's see a little bit of animation of how the DOM exactly works. So we have Visual Studio Code and we have our web browser. So let's say, for example, we have body, we have a body tag. So when immediately you start up this particular web page on your web browser, so the DOM looks something like this, right? So we have the body represented on our web browser. Now the next thing here, we have our H1 tag. In our H1 tag, we have hello YouTube. Now you can see the H1 tag being a child of the body. Right, being a child of the body, you can see it's directly connected to the body. Now let's say we have a UL tag, which is your unordered lists. You can see the UL tag appears directly as well under the body. Now let's say the UL tag has some my animation is going wrong. So let's say the UL tag also has some list of LIs, right? And you can see all of these LIs also appear beneath the UL tag, right? So the way the web browser is able to understand this piece of code is by translating those code into a structural pattern, which is very simple. And understanding this is very critical because this is the only way you can actually learn to use JavaScript to actually manipulate your web page, is by understanding the structure that holds all of your web page together and how your web page is actually translated. And this is what the DOM really does. This is exactly what the DOM does. So immediately your web page is loaded on your web browser, the DOM creates this representation immediately, automatically. And that is why we are able to write JavaScript and use some DOM manipulation APIs to manipulate our web page. And that's what we are going to be looking at. We're going to be going straight to Visual Studio Code to see how this whole thing works. Let's dive right in. Okay, so I have Visual Studio Code here, which is been the code editor we've been using for a while now. And I've gone ahead to create two documents. I have my index.html. I have my dom.js as well. And I also have some piece of code here just so we can have something to work with, right? I'm going to drop a link in the description below so you can have access to this piece of code as well. So we're just going to be practicing looking at some DOM manipulation APIs and all of those good stuff. That's what we're going to be doing. I'm using Live Server to load up my web page, so you're going to be seeing some features like auto reload, and all. You can just see how to install Live Server, and you'd also have that feature. So everything boils down to the documents. So if you go to your console and you type in document, remember I said your documents represent your web page. Now all of this web page is contained in this document, and that's why you would notice that immediately you type in documents, you would see that all of your web page is actually selected, right? That's to tell you that your web page is the exact thing as your document. So in order to access any node element at all within your web page, you have to type in your documents. You have to go through your documents. So your document is also basically an object. If we actually do a console.log, we can do a console.log, or we basically just expand this. Right? We can do a console.log or expand this. Okay, so let's see what we have here. So on expanding our documents, you can see that we have our HTML file here. We have our head, we have our body. If you go into your body, you would see all of our code base, right? Everything we have here. You can see our DOM.js, where we actually linked our JavaScript file. You can see that here. So that's just to tell you that your documents is basically an object that contains all of your web page objects. If you do not understand what an object is, I would advise that you check the previous video. We discussed extensively about the concept of object. Let's do this from our JavaScript file. Let's make sure our JavaScript file works. So basically just do an alert. You say hello world. Let's do a save here. Okay, so our JavaScript file works. Okay, so let's look at some of the contents of our documents. So we can say documents. We're just going to be doing a console.log. All right, so let's say so let's just say console.log, say documents. So if you go into your document objects, you can see that we have a lot of stuff here, right? And of course, we are not going to be covering everything in this video. Even this video is actually going to be broken into parts because of how voluminous the concept of DOM manipulation is, and you're only going to get better with use, right? So if you check out the projects we're going to be working on, you would notice that we rely heavily on DOM manipulation. So you can see document.add event listener. You can see how we are trying to get some attributes here. You can see how we're trying to change the content of a particular element here using text content, which is an API exposed by the DOM. We heavily rely on DOM manipulation. You can see how we're getting elements by ID. So all of these things are just what we're going to be looking at and what we're going to explain. So if you check out document.add, let's do a console.log on document.add. Let's see what we have. So you can see what that basically does is to log out the head portion of our document of our web page. We can also try out, let's try out document.body. I'm sure you already know what this is going to give us. It's basically going to give us the body version. That's the content of our body, and you can see that here being displayed. So you can see our nav bar, you can see all of this and all. You can also do a document. Let me teach you a little bit of shortcuts. So instead of doing console.log, you can just do CLG and you do your tab. All right, so that's much faster. So let's do documents.all. Okay, so this is cancelled because I think is a deprecated method. Nevertheless, we're going to see what it does. Yeah, so you can see document.all. So what document.all does is to give us an array of HTML all collection. It just basically spits out all of the content on our web page, right? And with this, we can actually access some of our elements using their index. So we can actually say var page content equals document.all. So we are assigning our document.all. We're just going to comment all of this out. We are assigning our document.all to page content. So we can do a console.log. Also, if you do not understand what an array is, we dealt with array extensively in our previous video tutorial. So I would advise that you check that out to understand what an array is. All of these things are building blocks. So there is no way you would skip a particular section and be comfortable with another section. So I'd advise that you just do your due diligence to check them out. So we can access, so you notice that in this array we have our HTML, which is more like this section, which is this guy is what we have first, and the next you see that we have our head second, and you'd also notice that we have meta. It's just aligning on each other just to show us everything we have. So if let's randomly select a 5 and let's see what that gives us. Page content of 5. Now that gives us a link. I want to select something within our web page here. So let's do a 10. Let's see what that gives us. Okay, so that gives us, I think that gives us our nav bar. That gives us our nav bar. Now with this, we can actually access our nav bar and manipulate the content of this DOM. So let's do that. 10. So we can say let's see what 11 actually gives us. Let's see what 11 gives us. Awesome. So 11 gives us the span directly. So we can actually come here, change this and say text content equals to I related you.com. Let's save this, and you notice that this change is already. You notice that this changed already, and it says I manipulated you. So this is actually how you can target a particular object on your web page and manipulate it automatically. You can manipulate. You would have noticed that when you go to a shopping site, and you see that when you're trying to add an object to your cart, and the number keeps increasing from 1, 2, 3. All of those are done with this type of manipulation. So when you understand how to do all of this, you have a very good edge on understanding how the web really works. Now, the reason why this pattern of object manipulation is not advisable is because we can easily go to our web page and let's just add anything at all. Let's just add an H1 here to say welcome. So let's have a welcome here. Let's just have like 4 of them and do a save. Now you would notice that this does not work any longer. You can see that we have our JS DOM. Now what you would see is I manipulated you. So what this did was page content on index 11 is no longer our navbar. So if we do let's do a console.log on our page content. No, page content on index 11. Now you see that our page content is now an H1, but previously our page content was a span. So that's why this is not a reliable pattern, because now and then you would always add elements to your HTML, and that is going to distort the index of your current selection, which is going to make matters very difficult and matters very worse. So the next thing we're going to do now is to see how to professionally select items, select objects in our web page. Now we've tried selecting objects using our documents.all and indexing the objects, and we've seen the disadvantage, right? So let's look at selectors. And the first selector we are going to be looking at is called get element by ID. Is as simple as the word says. This particular method helps us get any element of on the web page by its ID. So we can that means if we're going to be targeting any element, that element needs to have an ID. So let's give our span an ID of navbar title. Let's do a save on that. Now if we go to our JavaScript file and say let's just say nav equals, or instead of that, let's do a console.log. So let's say documents dot get elements by ID. You can see I have that here, get elements by ID. Now this requests for a parameter, and the parameter is an element ID string. So you need to pass that ID into this parameter. So I'll just copy this, which is the ID of the element I want to select, right? I'll copy this and paste it here. And let's hit our save. Now you notice what we have. So this gives us the exact element that we want to select. So let's do something much reasonable with this. Comment this out. I'll copy this. So I'll declare a variable, say nav title equals to this. So what I'm doing is I am selecting this object and I'm passing that object to this. So this becomes an HTML element, as you can see. It becomes an HTML element. Now there are a lot of things I can do with this. I can change the text contents. So you see text contents here. I can change it to say JavaScript Dom. Now you notice that is changed. I can also say document object model. I probably forgot to mention the full meaning of DOM is document object model, in case you've been wondering. I'm sorry about that. So we have this. We can also achieve this same thing using inner text. You can achieve this using inner text. So let's say using inner text. Let's do a save on that. You can see that as well. But there's a I think there's a subtle difference between text contents and inner text. Your text content doesn't pay attention to styling, right? So it doesn't mind styling, but inner text does pay attention to styling. So another thing we can also look at is .html. So let's do a console.log on .html and see what we have there. You can see what this shows. So this basically shows us the HTML structure of what we have within, whilst the rest would show us just the text, but this goes further to show us the HTML structure that we have within. We can also do a console.log on our style. I doubt we'll get anything here. Okay, so we have we basically do not have any styling on. We don't have any styling on that element. Alright, so let's give it some style. So let's say styling. Font weight, bold. Let's do a save on that. Okay, so you notice that we have this. So that's just telling you that we have a style called font weight on that particular element. So with this, we can actually say, and we can actually control our styling from JavaScript using the DOM. So we can say .style dots, and you can see on doing dots, we have a whole lot of styling here. Everything you would usually do in CSS, right? You can do that here as well. I mean, you have a whole lot. So we can say background color, or we just say color actually. So let's do color, and you can say equals to yellow. Do a save on that. You can see it changes to yellow. So there are a lot of things we can do, a whole lot of things. We can do background color. Can set background color to white, and that changes to white. So these are the things we can do with our styling. You can manipulate the style of your objects using .style. So yeah, that will be it for get elements by ID. Let's look at another selector called get elements by class. Now you notice the plurality of this particular method. So it says get elements by class name. So with that, you you can almost imagine what we are going to get from using this particular method. So let's look for list group items. So we're going to get all elements that has the class name of list group item. So let's do document dot get elements by class name. You can see that here. So it takes a parameter called class name, which is what we're going to add here. So let's do a variable. Let's save this in a variable. Say list items equals to this, and let's do typo. Let's do a console.log on list items, and let's see what we have. Okay, so you can see that we have an HTML collection, which is an array. Actually, we have an array of all the list items, and now all these list items is what we have on our web page, and you can see all of that here. All right, so I mean, this is fun. It's beautiful how you can actually do a whole lot of things with this. Now, obviously with this, you would realize that you are unable to actually manipulate this directly. So let's say you want to change the background color. You can't say dot style here. Obviously not, because this list item is an array, right? It's an array of HTML collection. So we have 3 elements here. So we have 3 elements here. So what you want to do is to loop through. You can loop through. So let's do a for each. Let's do it for each. So you can say list items. Let's keep it simple. So we can do a for loop, and we can say index x equals 0, x is less than or equal to list items dot length, and we can say x plus plus. So we can do, let's do a console.log on list items, accessing all of its elements via its index. So you can see what we have: first index, second index, and the third index. Okay, so this is this. So we don't have this last undefined here. All right, cool. So what this means is we can actually manipulate each of these elements within our console.log. All right, so I can go ahead to give all of them a background color by saying style black. So save. Now you can see that. All right, so we gave everything a background color of black. and we can also give them a text color style. It's very simple stuff of white. Yeah, so I mean, you can go further. You can go further by isolating a particular index. I mean, I can say if x equals 2, which is supposed to be our last index, we can say list items x dot background color should be white. We're supposed to type in style here first. Should be white. And color should be black. So we just isolated this particular one, so you can see that. So I mean, there are a lot of fun stuff that you could actually do with this, which makes it very interesting to work with. So another thing that we are going to look at, another selector we are going to look at is what we call query selector. And don't worry, I'm going to drop a link to this code base in the description section, so you can have a scroll through in your spare time or while watching this video. So let's see another called query selector. So query selector is quite simple. So still on the document objects, we can have query selector. So we have query selector. When you're selecting, you can select by the elements, you can select by your ID, you can select by class name, you can select by a whole lot of things, but I'll just advise you keep it simple. Personally, I do not use query selectors. I use get elements by ID, but whichever one works for you. But the reason why I'm showing you this is just so that you can you know that it exists, right? Yeah, that's the reason why I'm showing you this. So I'm going to be selecting the same thing. I'm going to be selecting my navbar title, which is this guy. Navbar title, where is it? So I'm going to be selecting this guy here. And now in this case, because I'm selecting an ID, I have to append an hash sign, right? I have to append an hash sign and then the name of the ID. Yes, I hope that's simple enough. You append an hash sign and then you append the name of the ID. That's how you do selection for an element using its ID. So let's do the same thing here. Nav title equals this, and let's do a console.log nav title. Awesome. Let's see what we have. Okay, so we have the same thing. We have nav title. It's just another way of selection. So you have all of this selection medium within your reach. All you just have to do is to use a particular one and be consistent at it. Which I've said, we are really going to be using get elements by ID when we start working on our projects. But just so you're aware that this also is a possibility, and you can do all of the things we've been doing with navbar title using the text contents, the inner text, and all of those things. You can do that here as well. You're not restricted, right? We also have query selector all. With the name, you probably might be able to guess what that does. So let's do query selector, and we have query selector all. So let's see how that works. What we are going to be doing here is, so query selector all is basically used to select more than one element. That's what it does, because it returns an array of elements. So we're going to be selecting our list items the same way we did here. But because this is a class, instead of assigning the hash sign, you're going to be assigning a dot sign. So we say query selector all, you do a dot and you do this. So let's do a console.log on list items. So when you're trying to target an element using the class, using its class, you would append a dot. When you're targeting an element using an ID, you append an hash sign. That's when you're using query selector, right? So let's save this and see what we have. Awesome. It's the same thing we have previously as well. So you have a node list of 3 items, which represents all of our lists. And then so all of these methods are at your disposal to select one and and just work with them. Everything we did here is also applicable here as well. We can run this on a for loop and manipulate the elements. It's beautiful, guys. It's beautiful. And you're going to appreciate all of this when we start working with our project. But we're going to be ending the first part of this particular video, DOM manipulation, here. And in the next video, we are going to be looking at how to actually traverse our DOM, how to go from parent to child, children, to append elements, to creating new elements. I hope to see you in the next video. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you're into anything tech at all. On this channel, we talk about all things web development, and we also talk about all things .NET as well. If you're into .NET Core, you're into software engineering generally, just hit the subscribe button. And thank you guys. See you in the next one. Bye bye.